The sound of hooves pounding against dusty earth tore through the quiet desert, slicing the early morning stillness like a blade. Rinna's dark eyes widened as she pressed herself against the jagged rock at the edge of the canyon, her fingers grazing the scar on her forearm. It wasn't just a mark on her skin, it was a memory carved into flesh, a whisper of pain that refused to fade. The approaching rider slowed as he neared the ridge, dust trailing behind him like a warning that danger or perhaps salvation had arrived. Cale, the Apache warrior, dismounted with measured caution, his black hair streaked with the sun's early gold. He adjusted the strap of his leather satchel and scanned Rinna with a mixture of concern and uncertainty. "That mark, it doesn't look like any accident," he said quietly, his deep voice carrying the weight of years spent reading wounds and reading people. The wind shifted, carrying the dry scent of mesquite and distant sage, and Rinna shivered. Something told her that Cale could see more than just the scar. He could see the story it held, the truth she had buried deep inside herself. "I told you not to follow me," she muttered, turning her head to avoid his gaze. Her voice was brittle, sharpened by years of self-imposed solitude and a fear that anyone who got too close would be burned by the memories she carried. Cale stepped closer, boots crunching against the coarse sand, and Rinna felt the taut line of her nerves stretch even tighter. He crouched slightly, studying her as if he could read the scar like a map of past sorrows. "You think I would let you face it alone?" Cale asked, his tone soft but insistent. There was no judgment in his eyes, only focus and a hint of worry. His presence, once intimidating in its sheer strength, now felt like a tether to something she had almost forgotten: trust, or perhaps hope. Rinna swallowed hard, trying to reconcile the fear in her chest with the strange pull she felt toward him. The cabin behind her, a small adobe structure clinging stubbornly to the edge of the mesa, smelled of dry earth, smoked sage, and the faint tang of charred wood. Its walls were rough, patched in places with sun-bleached cloth and timber scavenged from the canyon floor. Inside, the dim glow of the hearth cast flickering shadows that danced across her scar, making it seem almost alive. Rinna ran her fingers over the ridge of hardened skin, feeling the subtle indentation that had been etched into her arm one violent night she barely remembered. Cale's eyes lingered on the scar for a moment longer than necessary, and Rinna felt a prickle of unease. The scar was hers, yet in his gaze, it seemed to pulse with a story waiting to be told, a story she had sworn to keep hidden. "It's nothing," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But Cale did not accept the dismissal. He had lived long enough to know when someone hid behind words, when fear and pride collided in silence. Outside, the canyon stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of sandstone cliffs and jagged ridges bathed in the amber glow of dawn. The wind carved patterns into the sand, carrying faint echoes of distant coyotes, and the whisper of the river far below, its current singing a song of relentless passage. Every sound, every movement in the canyon seemed amplified against the fragile quiet of the morning. Rinna felt the weight of that vast emptiness pressing in on her, as if the desert itself were waiting for her to make a choice. Cale stepped forward, bridging the gap between caution and trust. "I've seen many scars," he said, his voice steady, but none that carried so much. "Love," Rinna froze, the word striking her like a bolt of lightning. "Love?" That word felt alien when tethered to the memory of this scar, a symbol of something both tender and tragic. She looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. "It's not love," she murmured. "It's a warning, a reminder of what I lost." Cale knelt beside her, letting the distance close, and for a moment the vast desert faded away. All that remained was the ridge of hardened skin, the memory etched into it, and the unspoken understanding that some scars never truly healed, they only became signs, markers of the battles fought not against enemies, but against fate itself. The wind picked up again, rattling the dry branches of a nearby mesquite, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke from a distant fire. Rinna's pulse quickened. Cale's gaze softened, but the tension in his body remained. Whatever had carved that scar into her skin had left a shadow behind, a shadow that still lingered, threatening to overtake her. And Cale, for all his strength and experience, could see it, and it worried him more than he wanted to admit. The scar was not just a wound. It was a story. And Rinna, whether she wanted to or not, was about to tell it. Cale's boots crunched against the coarse sand as he followed Rinna toward her adobe cabin perched precariously at the edge of the mesa. The wind gusted through the canyon, tugging at his long black hair and carrying with it the faint smell of distant smoke. Rinna moved with cautious grace, keeping her arm pressed to her side where the scar throbbed faintly. She could feel Cale's gaze lingering, sharp yet unassuming, like a hawk tracking prey, but there was no malice in his eyes. Only worry. Inside the cabin, the air was heavy with the scent of sage, smoke, and the lingering tang of sun-baked clay. Shadows from the small hearth flickered across rough wooden walls, illuminating the deep lines of survival etched into the cabin's every surface. Rinna gestured toward a worn chair near the fire, her movements tight with tension. "It's not safe for anyone to be here," she said, her voice brittle, like dried reeds snapping in the wind. Cale shook his head, his dark eyes unreadable. "I've seen danger before," he said quietly, "but you carry something I cannot ignore." Rinna looked away, brushing a strand of her dark hair from her face. She traced the scar on her arm again, the ridge of hardened skin pressing into her palm. Memories surged, flashbacks of firelight, screams, and the sharp taste of blood in the desert night. She had buried them deep, but Cale's presence, calm yet insistent, stirred a quiet ache she had tried to forget. "It's nothing," she whispered, though even she could hear the tremor in her own voice. Cale crouched slightly, letting the firelight play across the taut muscles of his bare torso, the tribal necklaces around his neck catching glints of gold and turquoise. The long black hair falling past his shoulders framed a face both rugged and alive with concern. "Nothing leaves a mark like that," he murmured. "It speaks. And I hear it." The desert outside pressed against the cabin walls with relentless heat, the afternoon sun baking the canyon floor to a dull orange glow. Rinna glanced at the window, noting the flicker of distant shadows between the cliffs. She sensed a presence she could not yet name, a danger that moved with the wind, curling around the mesa like smoke. "I don't know if I can trust anyone," she admitted, voice low, almost afraid it would vanish into the air. Cale rose, towering and steady, and approached her slowly. "Trust is earned," he said, "but I will not leave you to face this alone. Not now." His gaze softened, yet the alertness in his stance spoke of countless battles fought in the harshest deserts. Rinna felt something stir inside her, a fragile hope, buried beneath years of isolation. She studied him, noting the scars and calluses that spoke of survival, and realized that Cale was more than a warrior. He was a shield, a steady presence in a world that had been nothing but chaos for her. Outside, the wind carried whispers of movement through the mesquite and sage. The canyon seemed alive, each ridge and shadow suggesting a hidden threat. Rinna's pulse quickened, the scar on her arm tingling as if warning her. Cale noticed, his brow furrowing. "The desert speaks in many ways," he said, voice low. "You must listen, and you must prepare." Rinna nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest like stones. She glanced at the scar again, running her fingers along the hardened ridge. "It's not just a mark," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "It's a memory of love, of loss, and a promise I couldn't keep." Cale's eyes softened, understanding in ways words could never capture. He knelt beside her, letting the distance close, and for a moment, The world outside, the heat, the dust, the looming canyon disappeared. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the cabin walls, echoing the unspoken tension between them. Rinna drew a shaky breath, feeling both exposed and strangely comforted by his presence. "I'm afraid," she whispered finally. "Afraid that facing it means losing everything." Cale's hand hovered near hers, a silent offer of reassurance. "Facing it is the only way to survive," he said. "And you won't face it alone." Outside, the desert wind swirled, carrying the scent of sage, mesquite, and distant smoke. The canyon held its secrets tightly, but in that small adobe cabin perched on the edge of the world, two souls wounded yet resilient prepared to face what was coming. Rinna's scar, a mark of pain and love alike, seemed to pulse in the firelight, a quiet warning of the battles yet to come. And Cale, the Apache warrior with long black hair and tribal jewelry glinting in the sunlight, would not let her face them alone. The desert whispered. And Rinna knew that the story of her scar and the man who refused to leave her side was only beginning. The night fell like a heavy velvet curtain over the desert, draping the canyon in inky shadows that seemed to stretch into infinity. Stars shimmered overhead, countless pinpricks of light scattered across the sky, reflecting on the jagged cliffs and the dusty canyon floor below. Rinna led Cale to the edge of the mesa, where the air was cooler and the scent of sage and mesquite mingled with the faint tang of distant smoke. Her hand instinctively traced the scar on her forearm, the ridge of hardened skin pressing against her palm like a painful reminder of everything she had tried to forget. Cale's dark eyes followed her every movement, alert to the desert around them, yet soft with unspoken concern. He had seen countless battles, survived countless threats, but something about Rinna's scar, her history, her pain, the quiet strength she carried, made him pause. He dismounted silently, letting his horse graze nearby, and moved closer to her, the muscles in his chest and arms tense yet controlled, the tribal jewelry around his neck and arms glinting faintly in the moonlight. "It's not just flesh," Rinna said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, carrying with it the weight of years of solitude and buried memories. Cale's gaze softened. "I can see that," he said, keeping his voice low. The wind shifted, sweeping through the canyon and carrying with it distant cries, coyotes, perhaps, or something more ominous. Rinna's pulse quickened, and the scar seemed to prickle as if warning her of some unseen danger. "I never wanted anyone to see this," she confessed, her dark eyes glistening under the pale moonlight. "It's a memory? Of love, of loss, and a promise I couldn't keep." Cale stepped closer, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "Some scars speak louder than words," he said gently. "They tell stories. And this one, it's shouting." Rinna shivered, not entirely from the cool night air. She looked out over the canyon, the shadows stretching across the desert like fingers of fate, and felt the vast emptiness pressing in on her. For years she had believed she was alone, that no one could understand the burden she carried. Yet here was Cale, the Apache warrior, who had stepped into her world with caution, strength, and a quiet respect that made her heart beat faster. "I'm afraid," she admitted, finally turning to face him fully. "Afraid that facing it means losing everything. Afraid that if I let anyone in, I'll be broken all over again." Cale's gaze hardened, the firelight from the cabin behind them reflecting faintly on the polished turquoise and silver of his tribal jewelry. "The desert is unforgiving," he said, "but hiding from your past is the only thing that will leave you truly lost. I won't let that happen. Not to you." The stars above glimmered like scattered diamonds, and the wind whispered through the canyon as if echoing Cale's words. Rinna traced her scar again, fingers trembling slightly. "It wasn't just pain," she whispered, voice trembling. "It was love, and betrayal, and survival." She flinched at the memories, feeling the weight of firelight, screams, and blood flash through her mind. Cale placed a steady hand near hers, not touching but close enough to offer reassurance. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You survived. That alone is proof of strength, of love, and perhaps of hope." For a moment, the canyon fell silent except for the distant rustle of wind through the sagebrush and the soft breathing of Cale's horse nearby. Rinna's heart slowed slightly, the tension in her chest easing under the quiet steadiness of his presence. She realized that the scar was not a burden she bore alone, it was a story she could share, a truth she no longer had to hide. Cale finally spoke again, his voice barely above the wind. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said. "No shadows, no threats, nothing. We'll make you face this alone." Rinna nodded, drawing in a deep, shuddering breath, letting the moonlight wash over her and the promise of an ally, a warrior, a friend, settle in her chest. The desert night seemed to exhale around them, carrying the scent of sage, the shimmer of distant stars, and the quiet understanding between two souls who had stumbled into each other's paths. Rinna's scar glowed faintly in the moonlight, no longer just a mark of pain, but a symbol of survival, love, and the fragile, unspoken trust she was beginning to place in Cale. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she did not have to face the darkness alone. And Cale, the Apache warrior with long black hair, a muscular frame, and tribal jewelry glinting in the night, would not let her face it, whatever it was, without standing by her side. The desert whispered, the canyon held its secrets, and under the cold, brilliant light of midnight, the story of the scar and the love it represented continued to unfold. Morning crept over the desert like a slow flame, painting the canyon in soft gold and ochre. Rinna and Cale had spent the night near the hidden river, the water reflecting the first rays of sun like molten silver. The night's confessions had left them both quietly restless, a tension simmering beneath the calm surface. As Rinna ran her fingers along the scar on her forearm, Cale's sharp eyes scanned the canyon, muscles tensed beneath his tribal jewelry and bare chest. He had learned long ago that danger often came with the dawn, and the desert never forgave carelessness. A sudden glint in the distance drew Cale's attention. At first, it seemed like a trick of the sun on stone, but then he saw it clearly, a lone rider moving stealthily through the canyon mouth. The figure's posture was deliberate, a hand hovering near the rifle slung across his back. Cale's jaw tightened. He recognized the signs immediately. The rider was watching them, waiting, calculating. Rinna noticed the change in his stance, the way his dark eyes narrowed. "Who is it?" she whispered, her voice taut with worry. "I don't know," Cale admitted, his voice low and steady. "But he's no ordinary traveler." He mounted his horse with practiced ease, the sun glinting off the tribal jewelry and the long black hair that framed his strong, rugged face. Rinna hesitated, torn between fear and the instinct to run, but Cale's hand rested briefly on hers, a silent reassurance. "We can't let him follow us," he said. "The canyon is his advantage, but not ours." They slipped into a narrow ravine, dust swirling around their boots and hooves as the canyon walls closed in like watchful sentinels. The desert's heat pressed against them, and every step was a careful negotiation between safety and exposure. Rinna's heart pounded in her chest as she kept her hand pressed against her scar, the ridge of hardened skin a constant reminder of the fragility of life in this harsh land. Cale moved with the fluid grace of a predator, alert to every movement, every sound, every shadow that might betray their pursuer. As they navigated the twists of the canyon, the wind carried faint whispers scooped up from distant cliffs, mingling with the scent of sage and dry earth. Rinna glanced at Cale, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes flicked to every ridge and crevice. "Do you think he knows?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Knows about me?" Cale's gaze softened momentarily. Perhaps, he admitted. Or perhaps he's just another danger. Either way, we must stay ahead. The sun climbed higher, casting long, jagged shadows across the canyon floor. Rinna's legs ached from the scramble over rocks, and her lungs burned from the exertion, yet she pushed forward, driven by instinct, fear, and the unspoken trust she had begun to place in Cale. The scar on her arm seemed to prick again, almost as if sensing the presence of unseen eyes, a warning she could neither see nor ignore. Cale noticed her faltering step and slowed, letting her move beside him. "The desert tests us," he said quietly, voice carrying both authority and reassurance. "It's cruel, but it also teaches survival." By midday, they reached a small outcropping that overlooked the canyon's mouth. From this vantage point, they could see their pursuer clearly. The rider had stopped, scanning the ravine they had just passed, as if realizing the trail had gone cold. Cale's jaw tightened, his dark eyes sharp with calculation. "He's dangerous," he murmured, "and he will follow if we let him. We need a plan." Rinna's pulse quickened, the scar on her forearm tingling, a silent alarm etched into her flesh. For the first time, she realized that the past she had tried to bury was catching up with her, not as a memory, but as a living, breathing threat. Cale placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." The desert stretched endlessly around them. Cliffs and mesas painted in fiery oranges and soft ochres, the wind carrying the scent of sage, dust, and danger. Rinna drew a deep, shaky breath, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her like the relentless sun. The scar on her arm seemed to throb in rhythm with her heartbeat, a reminder of past wounds and future battles. Cale, the Apache warrior with long black hair, tribal jewelry glinting in the sunlight, and a muscular, unyielding frame, would not let her face them alone. And for the first time, she believed him. The canyon held its secrets tightly, but Rinna knew they would have to face them all: shadows, riders, and perhaps the truth hidden in her own heart. The stranger was patient, calculating, and the desert was vast, but Cale and she would move as one. And when the moment came, they would be ready. The heat of the afternoon pressed down on the canyon like a living thing, making the air shimmer in waves above the sun-baked earth. Rinna and Cale moved cautiously along a dry riverbed, each footstep sending small clouds of dust into the wind. Her forearm itched where the scar ran deep across her skin, a constant reminder of both the past and the danger that now seemed to follow them relentlessly. Cale rode beside her, his dark eyes scanning the cliffs and ridges, every muscle taut beneath the sun, his long black hair pulled back slightly by the desert wind. The tribal jewelry around his neck and arms caught glints of sunlight, making him appear almost otherworldly, a guardian forged by the harshland itself. Rinna's chest tightened as she spotted the smoke curling over a distant ridge. "Cale, fire," she whispered, voice trembling. He did not need her words to confirm what he already suspected. The dry brush along the mesa was catching, flames licking the edges of rocks and dry grass. The desert's heat, already unbearable, became a furnace of impending danger. "We need to move now," Cale said, mounting his horse with swift precision. Rinna followed, gripping the reins of her own mount, her heart pounding with every step. The fire crackled and roared as they navigated the narrow ridges, the scent of smoke filling their lungs. Rinna's scar prickled sharply, a phantom pain warning her of the imminent threat. Cale's eyes never wavered from the flames ahead, every decision measured, calculated. "This was never meant to happen," she murmured, glancing back at the burning riverbed where they had passed only hours before. Cale shook his head, his dark gaze steely. "The desert doesn't plan, it just acts," he replied. "We survive it, together." The flames cast long, dancing shadows across the canyon walls, painting the landscape in fiery orange and red. The heat was oppressive, pressing against their faces and bodies, making each breath labored. Rinna felt a wave of panic rise in her chest, but Kale's calm strength anchored her. She noticed the way his muscles flexed with controlled power, the sun glinting off his tribal jewelry, the bare expanse of his chest moving with each deliberate motion. He was danger and safety in one form and indomitable presence in a merciless landscape. The fire leapt toward them faster than expected, tongues of orange licking the dry brush and igniting low-hanging mesquite branches. Kale urged his horse forward, weaving along the riverbed, and Rinna followed, feeling the searing heat on her skin. The scar on her forearm burned like a signal flare, echoing the danger around them. Her pulse raced, not only from fear, but from the realization that every choice she had made, every secret she carried, was leading her to this moment. A sharp gust of wind fanned the flames, sending sparks into the sky like fiery stars. Kale glanced back, his eyes meeting Rinna's, and for a fleeting second she saw vulnerability hidden beneath his warrior's exterior. "Stay close," he commanded, voice low but firm. Rinna nodded, gripping her scar as if it could steady her against the fire, the wind, the unknown. She realized then that this scar, this symbol of love and loss, was more than a memory. It was a compass, guiding her through the chaos of both desert and destiny. The riverbed widened as they reached a small rock outcropping, providing momentary safety from the fire's advance. Rinna slid from her horse, her legs trembling, and traced her scar once more. "I've carried this for so long," she whispered, voice breaking. Kale knelt beside her, placing a steady hand near hers without touching, offering silent reassurance. "You survived everything before," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. "And you will survive this. The desert tests us all, but together we are stronger than it." The flames roared behind them, a vivid reminder of the desert's unforgiving nature, yet in the shadow of the rock, Rinna felt the first true sense of hope she had known in years. Kale, the Apache warrior with long black hair, muscular frame, and tribal jewelry glinting in the sun, stood beside her, a living shield against both danger and despair. The desert might burn, it might test, but with him, she felt that survival and perhaps something more was within reach. As the wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and dry earth, Rinna knew that the scar on her arm was not just a wound from the past. It was a sign, a reminder of love, resilience, and the battles that had yet to come. And Kale would not let her face them alone. By evening, the desert sun had dipped low, casting the canyon in molten gold and deepening the shadows of jagged cliffs. Rinna and Kale found themselves at a hidden river, its waters sparkling like liquid silver as it wound through a grove of cottonwoods. The cool air was a relief after the searing heat and fire earlier in the day, carrying the scent of damp earth, sage, and the faint tang of distant smoke. Rinna knelt at the riverbank, cupping the cool water in her hands and letting it trickle over her scarred forearm. The ridge of hardened skin tingled under her touch, a reminder of battles fought and memories she could not escape. Kale stood nearby, muscles relaxed but alert, shirtless under the dimming light, tribal jewelry catching the last rays of sun. Long black hair fell over his shoulders, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. He scanned the canyon walls, senses honed from years in the desert, every detail of the river, the cliffs, and the surrounding scrub etched in his memory. His gaze softened as he watched Rinna, noticing the way her fingers lingered over the scar, tracing a story only she knew. "You're not just running from him," Kale said quietly, breaking the stillness. His voice carried over the gentle rush of water, calm but commanding. Rinna turned her gaze to him, dark eyes glimmering with unshed tears. "I'm running from myself," she admitted, voice trembling. "From memories I thought I buried, from a life that feels unfinished." Cale's jaw tightened, his expression a mixture of understanding and determination. "Then it's time to face it," he said softly. "Whatever it is, you won't face it alone." The river sparkled beneath the blood-orange hues of sunset, reflecting the tension and quiet intimacy of the moment. Rinna lowered her hands into the water, letting the current wash away soot, dust, and the lingering heat of the fire. She shivered as cool water flowed over her scar. But this shiver was not entirely from temperature. It was from the vulnerability of sharing something so personal with another person. Cale stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the riverbank, muscles taut yet controlled, tribal jewelry glinting faintly. "This scar. It tells a story," he said, his tone reverent. "A story of love, loss, and survival. And whatever tried to take that from you, failed." Rinna swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat. "It's not just a mark," she whispered. "It's a sign? A sign of love, of promises kept and broken." She let her hand hover over the scar, the cool river water reflecting the fading light. Cale's dark eyes softened, and for the first time that day, the tension in his shoulders eased. "Love," he repeated, almost as if tasting the word. "That's what gives a scar meaning. Not the pain it carries, but the strength to survive and the courage to keep moving forward." Rinna felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. A fragile sense of hope mingling with the fear she still carried. The wind rustled through the cottonwoods, carrying the whisper of the river and the distant cries of nocturnal desert creatures. Cale's gaze swept the river's edge, alert to the shadows and potential threats. Yet there was a gentleness in the way he watched Rinna. She realized that the scar, once a private and painful memory, had become a bridge between them, a symbol of trust slowly forming in the harshest of landscapes. "I've been afraid for so long," Rinna admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that if anyone saw this, they would run, or worse, leave me alone." Cale stepped closer, the moonlight beginning to glint off his long black hair and polished jewelry. "Fear is natural," he said, voice low and firm. "But it doesn't control us. Not here, not now. You survived the desert, the fire, the past. And you'll survive what comes next." Rinna's hand lingered over the scar one last time before she let it rest in the river. The water shimmered around her fingers, reflecting the moonlight as stars began to emerge overhead. Cale watched her with quiet reverence, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they had forged a bond in the desert's trials, one built on survival, trust, and the fragile, persistent thread of love. The canyon around them seemed to exhale, the river singing a soft, sacred song. And in that moment, Rinna understood that her scar was no longer a burden. It was a guide, a reminder of what she had endured and what she was capable of. With Cale by her side, the Apache warrior with long black hair, a muscular frame, and tribal jewelry catching the moonlight, she felt ready to face whatever shadows the desert still held. The river whispered. And Rinna, scarred yet unbroken, knew her story and her connection with Cale was only beginning. The first light of dawn spilled across the desert like molten gold, igniting the canyon walls and casting long shadows across the sand and rocks. Rinna and Cale had camped near the sacred river overnight, the gentle rush of water offering a lullaby that soothed their frayed nerves. The scar on Rinna's forearm seemed to throb faintly in the cool morning air, a reminder of battles fought, promises lost, and love that had endured against impossible odds. Cale, shirtless as always, his muscular frame glistening faintly in the dawnlight, tribal jewelry catching the sun's glow, stood near the river's edge, scanning the horizon. His long black hair swayed slightly in the gentle wind, and the depth in his dark eyes reflected both vigilance and tenderness. He had faced countless dangers in the desert, but the protective instinct he felt toward Rinna was unlike anything he had ever known. He had sworn silently that no harm would come to her, not while he drew breath. Rena approached him slowly, her fingers brushing over her scar. "Cale," she began, her voice soft yet laced with emotion. He turned, meeting her gaze with a quiet intensity. "It's not a scar," she said, holding her arm out for him to see. "It's a sign of love." Cale's eyes softened, and for a long moment neither spoke. The desert stretched endlessly around them, cliffs and mesas painted in gold and crimson by the rising sun. The river's silver ribbon mirrored the sky's awakening colors, and the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of sage and wet earth. The danger that had stalked them, the distant rider, the fire, the relentless desert seemed to pause, as if granting this moment of fragile clarity. "You survived so much," Cale said finally, voice low, reverent. "And every mark on your body, every scar, it tells a story, one of strength, courage, and heart. Love is not always soft, Rena. Sometimes it leaves a mark." A reminder that it was real. He stepped closer, his shadow merging with hers as he gently placed his hand near, but not on hers. The warmth of his presence sent a shiver through her, a mix of fear, relief, and hope. Rena swallowed, feeling the weight of years of isolation, danger, and secret pain lift slightly in his presence. "I always thought love would break me," she admitted, voice trembling. "I never imagined it could survive, or even find me here." Cale shook his head slowly, dark eyes unwavering. "Love finds those who endure. It finds those who bear the scars, the memories, the weight of the past, because they are strong enough to carry it." The sun rose higher, bathing the canyon in warm light, revealing every detail of the rugged terrain and sparkling river. Rena looked down at her scar once more, tracing its ridge as if she could read the story written into her skin. "It's a memory," she whispered, "of pain, of loss, and of something I almost forgot. But it's also hope. And now, with you, maybe it can mean more." Cale nodded, his lips curling into a small, rare smile. "It already does," he said, "and it always will, this scar. It's a sign of what endured, of what will endure." His voice carried the authority of a warrior and the tenderness of a man who had finally found purpose beyond survival. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant mesquite smoke. Rena let herself breathe fully for the first time in years, the fear and isolation giving way to trust, connection, and the fragile promise of love. Cale's hand hovered near hers again, a silent offer, a bridge between past and future. "I'm ready," she said, her dark eyes meeting his with quiet strength. "Ready to face whatever comes next. As long as you're with me." Cale's smile widened, his long black hair catching the sunlight, tribal jewelry glinting as he extended a hand to her. "We face it together," he promised. "Every shadow, every threat, every trial. Together." The desert whispered around them, the sacred river gleaming silver in the morning light, and the canyon seemed to hold its breath in witness. Rena's scar no longer felt like a burden. It was a beacon, a testament to survival, love, and the courage to embrace both. And beside her, Cale, the Apache warrior with a muscular frame, long black hair, and tribal jewelry glinting in the sun, stood as protector, companion, and perhaps something more, a symbol that even in the harshest, most unforgiving land, love could endure, leaving its mark not as a wound, but as a sign. The desert stretched endlessly before them, but for the first time, Rena did not feel alone. She had survived, she had loved, and she had found someone who would stand by her through fire, shadow, and scar alike. The story of her scar, of her past, and of the warrior who refused to leave her side had reached a new chapter, one of hope, trust, and the enduring power of love.